Welcome to the latest episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the town of Miami Lakes. I'm Mayor Manny Cid. We have a great guest today. We have the CEO of Pacific National Bank, Carlos Fernandez Guzman. How you doing, Carlos?
Always good, Manny. How about you?
All is good. All is good. It's great to have you on. I wanted to thank some of our sponsors. We're powered by Miami Lakes AutoMall. Thank you to Fred Senra. They're located at 16600 Northwest 57th Avenue here in the town of Miami Lakes. Their phone number is 305-455-3510. He gave the seed money for us to buy the equipment up front and do a lot of cool stuff because he really believes in the power of education. So we really, really appreciate him. Carlos, what do you think? What do you think of this mural?
Well, we were talking about it before you got here, right? Cool piece of art. So, and you get to look at it every day, eh?
Every day. It's in a. I don't think anybody's seen something like this in a mayoral office anywhere in the county.
Congratulate the artist.
So the artist is a local school counselor that at night she paints. She's incredibly talented. Her name is Grisel Gajano. She lives here locally. Her number is 786-353-8608. Thank you, Grisel. Really, really appreciate it. And our film production team, the Matter Lakes Broadcasting. Carlos, one of the cool things about this podcast is not only do we get to share the message and the stories of great folks like yourself, but there's a community component, a social component, right? Where this is a live classroom. These folks started it last year. I think we had like 9 students and 1 teacher. They're up to 3 teachers and 90 kids in this academy. And it's gone so far that they film not only the podcast, but every single sports game that the school has in real time for free for all the parents. And they have announcers, and you watch it. And it's like watching a game on ESPN. Has like tickers on the bottom and different stats, different ththings going on. So, and they teach the editing. So all these tools.
Where were you guys when my kids were playing sports? I mean,
that is true. That is true. But yeah, they do a phenomenal job. So one of the questions that we start off the podcast with that we believe is incredibly powerful. It's your why. Why? You know, when you were a kid growing up, when did you say, I want to be a banker? I want to be the CEO of a bank. Because I have a lot of friends of mine that, they're in banking. They might be, the lead on a branch. But when did you say, I want to be the CEO of an entire bank? When did that happen?
So it's kind of a funky story. I never had any desire to be a banker whatsoever. I got a job at night at a bank to pay for law school. I actually wanted to be an attorney. Lucky I didn't, because probably be going in a different direction at the end of the day if I would have been an attorney. But
good move.
It was a good move. So got a job, started working part-time at night, and kind of started to fall in love with the concept of, wait a minute, so with $1 I can leverage and raise $10, and if I raise $10, I can raise $100, and started to understand the dynamics of leveraging capital and understanding all those elements. And all of a sudden it got kind of interesting. But it was still coincidental. And the story is really, really funny. Because I was working one day, late at night, part-time. We ran a unit called the Records and Research Unit, which was a machine that you kind of researched drafts and stuff on. And you took copies of it. When customers had a dispute, you took a copy of the draft and you gave it to customers. And it was a team of 4 of us part-timers. We had a blast. Every night we would work really hard. We were the top producing unit in that area. But we had a blast. We were always kidding around. We were always joking around. Gentleman walks in, short sleeve shirt, glasses, tie. He's watching us. And I was kind of concerned because, you're a bunch of kids, 9 o'clock at night, you're having a good time. So I turned around and I said, can I help you? And he says, oh, no, you don't need to help me. We kept kidding around, and he kept watching. And finally I turned around and said, it's kind of bothersome to have somebody hovering over you. Can I help you? He says, no, that's okay. That's okay. So he left, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is just an older gentleman who's working part-time like we are. Next day I walk in, and my supervisor says, Carlos, did you have a visitor last night? Yeah, I said, an older guy with a tie came by. Didn't really understand. Says that guy is the executive vice president of Southeast Bancorp.
Wow.
And he wanted to kind of meet you. I'm thinking to myself, oh man, this is going to be a short career, right? This guy's going to tell me that I was having too much fun. And long story short, went up, I met him, his first question was, would you have acted the same way last night if you knew who I was? And I said, yeah. Because quite honestly, if you're going to do something and you're going to work at it, you might as well have fun, right?
Yep.
So long as you're doing your job. Well, long story short, he converted me from part-timer to a full-timer working on projects only for him. And I started a career with Southeast as what it was called in those days, a workout or an efficiency expert. He would put me in areas to learn about different things, and he would ask me to come up with a plan to fix it. There were 5 of us. And we would fix it. And as soon as we got it fixed, he'd move us on to another area. So the reason he wanted the young, energetic, little rambunctious crowd was because he knew that we didn't know what we were doing. So we just couldn't figure out why not to do things.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
It's a great story because you learn banking from the ground up, not knowing a darn thing about banking. Right? And that became the love. As you went through all these departments, and I think in 7 years, Manny, I must have gone through, or in 5 years for Southeast, I must have gone through 7 or 8 areas. And again, you went in, you fixed it the minute you had it fixed. The minute you had it fixed, and you thought, oh man, I'm going to be able to settle in, I'm going to be able to. He'd come in and he'd say, Carlos, is it done? Yeah, okay. You're moving it tomorrow. So it was a wonderful start. From that point on,
But I think one of the great lessons for the kids is that you never know who's watching.
You never know who's watching, and you never change who you are.
Exactly. And that's what people look for. They look for people that are genuine. Yeah. And that, they see you're acting the same way that you would act in front of them, you would act behind, because I think that creates that foundation of trust, right?
For those of you who know sports, and for those of you who play sports, you play every game like it's the last game you're going to play, and you play it like it's always what kind of game you want to play, right? And that's the way it is.
100%.
So that started the love, that started the interest. When did I decide I wanted to be a CEO? That's kind of the way I'm wired. If I'm going to do anything, I want to be leading it, not following it. So that's the deal. I mean, if you're going to be doing anything, I'd rather be in a leadership position and putting a team together and getting it to perform the way it should, as opposed to following. I'm not much on following.
Got it. No, we'll get to a Miami Lake story after that, talking about how leadership is so important. But I think from that story of you starting off as a part-timer and going through the ranks, and then today, right? You're the CEO, the president of $1 billion bank. Not only as somebody who went through the process, but as a member of the Cuban exile community, right? Somebody who we know what happened to our parents, our grandparents, losing everything. But just, how does that feel? Like being a member of this community and then going all the way up to being the CEO of $1 billion bank. I think that's phenomenal, right? That's
that is an achievement you reach because of all the people that have helped you on the way up. And one of the things you come to understand in a career as long as mine is that every step of the way, there's always someone on top of you reaching out to pull you up, and there's always someone underneath you pushing you up, right? And if you don't have both, it doesn't really work. You don't climb the ladder all by yourself. You always have help from the bottom, the people who are doing the work that you're tasked to lead and doing it well. And you always have the person on top who recognizes what you've been doing and lifts you and the people that work with you up the ladder. So that is an accomplishment for the entire universe of people that had an impact in your career, not just for you. You're a vessel, you're a vehicle, you're one of those, but give credit to the entire mechanism, not just to what you did. As an immigrant, we go back to how I feel about this country. Whenever someone criticizes America, I always say to myself, my God, how can you even begin to have criticism for a place that provides you with the level of opportunity that this place provides you? No one comes here without having the same opportunity as the next guy. And the people who succeed are only succeeding because that opportunity is present. And to have that as an immigrant, to feel like you always have a chance to rise up that ladder, to know that it's a guarantee. And it's important that everyone, the young people that come to this country now, understand What you're guaranteed is the opportunity. You're not guaranteed an outcome.
That's true.
The outcome is your responsibility. But that opportunity, the fact that you're guaranteed that opportunity, that's golden. Golden, golden, golden. And America for me, Manny, and coming to this country as an immigrant, I came with my mother by myself at the age of 10. We came with a little bag this big, a pair of pants, a shirt, socks, underwear, and that was it. There was no money. It was one change of clothes and what you had on. That experience, I will never change it or want to change it for any reason, because that is the foundation that created the pillars that built Carlos Fernandez Guzman.
No, that's so powerful, because that story from having that little, suitcase, all your belongings were in one thing, to where you're at today. I mean, that is amazing. And when you look back at the struggles of everybody that came before us, that just sharing that story, I think for the kids really inspires them, because the majority of kids that go to Matter Lakes are kids whose parents immigrate here from other countries, and that are going to be watching this podcast from other schools.
One of the conversations that I've always had with young people is, and it's based on my experience, right? Whenever I start to have doubts or I start to think about how difficult life is, or the rock that settles me, the point of reference is always my parents, right? So people who had everything in their country, who chose to pick up everything they had and leave it behind, pick up a life and come to the United States with nothing, just to give their children an opportunity at liberty, at freedom, at advancement. You say, no matter how hard life gets for you, that's what grounds you. You go back and say, you know what? Whatever I'm going through is insignificant compared to what our parents, the generation before us, did. Because it truly, truly was a labor of love and a sacrifice that very few people would make.
Yeah, that's I phrase it as that's the gas in the tank, right? Yep, that we need every day. When there's days that I'm like, man, this is tough, and I think back of my grandmother who passed away 6 years ago, my dad who passed away, a couple months ago, and I'm like, we got to keep moving forward, and that's what kind of that motivation. One of the challenges that the pandemic brought. I'm going to shift a little bit more into the institution's finances and how you work at PNC. One of the when the pandemic hit, everything went haywire, right? People thought that our financial world was going to end. I mean, even here in the town of Miami Lakes, we had city council members that were screaming, "Oh, we're going to go bankrupt. We got to shut everything down." And it was actually the reverse, right? We saw an increase in even our sales tax revenue. People were buying more. They were home. The economy kept moving forward. But I think from your perspective, for a long time, the big institutional banks, right? Bank of America, Chase, they were kind of winning, right? They have a lot of money to pour. But I think what the pandemic did, people started saying, you know what? We need more community banks where I can pick up the phone, talk to Carlos Fernandez Guzman, which does not have to talk to a branch manager at Bank of America. It's impossible. Yeah. But at your bank, it's $1 billion bank to talk. So I think the pandemic, personal opinion, kind of shifted that thought process. But how did it impact?
I'll share with you. For many, 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 many years, the tendency and the trend in banking has been for even the regulators to want consolidation and want the bigger institutions to survive, right? So for many, many years, the regulators kind of looked at community banking as almost like a nuisance, in the sense that they're smaller, we have to worry about them. Well, the financial crises in this country have traditionally proven them quite wrong, right? So when the crisis of the 2008-2009 collapse came, it's the community banks that pulled the small business out of the hole. With the pandemic, it was a community bank that actually became the conduit for the Paycheck Protection Program and so many other assistance programs that the big banks couldn't even begin to undertake. You would be surprised if I told you the stories of how many businesses tried to go to their big bank, I won't use names, their big banks, couldn't get a PPP loan and were able to get a PPP loan through Pacific and others like Pacific National in less than 24 hours. The stories are endless. And they would always say, oh my God, how can you do it? Well, you know why we can do it? Because we're your partner. We don't see ourselves as a service provider. We see ourselves as a partner in your business. We want you to achieve success. We want you to, when we look at you as a business, we look at you as someone that we want to essentially give that helping hand up for. Because as you grow, we grow. We depend on you. It's a different perspective, it's a different framing, it's a different culture. The community bank is chartered specifically for that reason. Specifically. To aid the residents and to aid the small business community. And man, we do our job extremely well. If it would not have been for the community banks, the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program would have never gotten off the ground. Because it was the only point of distribution that worked.
That is very, very true. I know a lot of people that shifted to community banks. So yeah, it turned out to be an opportunity, right, to provide that level of service.
It was an opportunity. It was a reaffirmation of our value. You know, when a customer finally gets through a cycle like that and comes out whole in the other end, comes out on the other end healthy, they look back and they say, "Wait a minute. You know, I had migrated away from these smaller banks to kind of get a different set for service from the bigger guys." It didn't work. When push came to shove, I needed to go back to the folks that really value my business. And we were the ones that won in that equation. Many of the folks that got the PPP through the banks, the community banks, ended up moving all of their relationships, all, personal, business, everything, to the community banks from the big banks. And the reason that happened was because they came to the realization that, yes, I can pick up the phone and talk to the president of the bank. Yes, I can pick up the phone and talk to my account officer. Yes, I can go to the bank and see that officer, even during the pandemic. We didn't close a branch. Every single branch was open. We were receiving customers. It is the core, it is the fiber of what we do.
No, that's definitely very very powerful. So shifting a little bit with your experience in banking and your experience in the communities and doing a lot of really cool things. I remember here in the town of Miami Lakes, one of my fellow colleagues put something on the agenda on how to improve customer service in the building department. And when I read it on the agenda, I was like, you know, I think the biggest mistake for these committees that are always made in town hall is that they always appoint just people in a certain industry, right? And I'm a big believer is, you know, if we're going to review the police department, we kind of need a different perspective, just not law enforcement alone. If we're going to review the building department shouldn't just be building officials. You should have. So when it came up, I was like, wait a second. I'm going to talk to Carlos, because Carlos has one of the things that you taught me, and I'll never forget. You told me, he goes, Manny, every profession in the world, every profession, besides, you told me that there was a handful that you told me, a neurosurgeon, a nuclear physicist, you can learn.
Yeah.
You can learn, right? There's some people have the rule at 6 years, right? That if you do something, you master it, right? But that you can learn. So I said, you know, somebody with that mind frame, you know, we need on the committee. I remember talking to you and you jumped on and you got on the committee. You're like, Manny, I love this community. I'm a member of this community. I want to be part of it. And I remember you going through this process. And at the end of the day, you were the one that was presenting it to the council. Today, from that entire process, I mean, almost everything that you all push forward is being implemented today. But how was that process?
First, I have to compliment you and your colleagues, because I think the realization that drove this process was that you had a stakeholder called a resident who's a customer, and you need to treat that resident as a customer, and that any good business caters to a customer's needs. And I think that basic premise sometimes falls short in government. Sometimes we don't understand in public sector, so not so much in the private sector, because that's what pays our paycheck. But in the public sector, we tend to forget the connectivity to that customer service, that stakeholder, that customer relationship. And I think that's what drove our engagement as a committee. I have to tell you, the group that worked on this committee was a great group. I mean, you say I presented it, but I presented a perspective of a great group. Good group of professionals, people who were thinking outside of the box, and who approached the process correctly, because they weren't interested in doing anything other than delivering to the resident the maximum level of engagement and customer service possible within the scope of what a building and zoning department does. Right? So it was an interesting process, because when we were asking questions at first, no one was willing to acknowledge that a customer even existed. So it was almost hilarious, right? They said, no, we don't have customers. Okay, yes, you do. Right? And they don't have a choice. No, yes, they do. Because do you know what? If I'm looking for a home, and I'm looking for a home that needs to be worked on, and I hear that your building and zoning department doesn't deliver the right services, I'm going to buy in Doral, right? And yet the choice is where I live. That we don't have customers and contractors. No, that's not true either. So a contractor can choose not to work in Miami Lakes. Why? Because you are not efficient. And at the end of the day, a contractor, what's his value? Time. So if you're wasting their time and you're not reacting properly, and you're not engaging, and you're not communicating, and they don't find it comfortable to work here efficiently, you know what? They'll say, I'll work in Doral, Coral Gables, I'll work Miami Beach. I'm not going to work Miami Lakes. So yes, you do have customers, and yes, you do have to cater, much to the credit of the people who are in that department today. Can't speak for the predecessors, but I will speak for the ones that ended up being in that department. They realized it in the process. They embraced what we were doing. They listened. They translated. And I think they've implemented a system that is much more customer receptive and customer centric than what you had before.
So one of the fascinating things and that ended up happening with this whole process, I know some people ended up leaving, some people came in, but the one person that was appointed to be the head of our department today was one of the ones that embraced everything, said, hey, I want to learn. And that mind frame that he has started off because he started here in the town of Miami Lakes as a part-time code enforcement officer. Driving around, part-time code enforcement officer. One day, our parks department, the assistant to the parks director, had left. I moved to another state, so they said, oh, this opened up. He said, look, I would love to work here full-time. Completely different. Now you're going from code to parks. Talking about what you told me that you couldn't learn. Code to parks. All right. So he's in that department. The parks director ends up moving to another position. So that opens up at some point. He says, look, I'm willing to do it. I'll be more than happy. I've learned this enough that he did it. He excelled. Our procurement manager at the same time left. So we had a vacancy. This is a contract city. Procurement's extremely difficult. There's an ordinance this big they have to follow. He was like, you know what? While I'm doing the parks director job, I can also do that in the interim. I'll take it on. He learned. He mastered that. Did a great job. The entire process continues. He's in that position. Now the parks director, we brought in a new procurement manager. He learned how to do procurement. He could do it today. The building department stuff, the changes, some people had left. There was an opening. They said, well, we're going to change the way it works. We're going to hire, instead of a building official that does everything, we're going to bifurcate this position and have the building official take care of what needs to be taken care of, which is following the state laws, following the state statute. Exactly. Exactly. Doing the things that he has to follow the law, right? But I'm going to hire somebody that's going to do the customer service. That when somebody comes in and files a permit, not only does that person get a call to his contractor, but gets a call themselves, right? Coordinates that. Mm-hmm. And that individual jumped in and he said, you know what? I can learn. I can do it. He's excelling today. He's doing a phenomenal job. So but it goes back to what you said. You can, as long as you have that ability and you believe it, you could start off as a part-time code enforcement guy, go all the way around. Yeah. And
so most things in life boil down to very basic things, right? So in business, you either have to provide or sell something at a price that leaves you a profit, and you have to do it in a way where the person buying wants to come back and buy some more. It's that simple. I don't care what you do. It doesn't matter whether it's banking, aircraft, mechanic. It doesn't matter. The basic principles of business are those principles. And what that young man, I think it's Danny, the one that you're referring to.
Danny Angel.
What you saw in Danny right off the bat is he got that concept. He knew that the things that were trying to be made complicated are not that complicated. They all boil down to pretty simple stuff. And he also understood that the smart guy learns from somebody else without having to go through the trouble of experiencing themselves. And Daddy listened, and he asked questions, and you could tell. I will never forget that at the first meeting that he attended, he whipped out a notepad, and he was taking copious notes, because he wanted to basically benefit from all the years that each of us had in dealing with the issues he was dealing with from a customer service perspective. We could never opine on code. That's not our job. But all of us on that committee were people that had to deal with customers and had to provide the level of service necessary and knew what the efficiencies were, and that sometimes you sacrifice customer service for efficiency. That should never be the case. You can achieve efficiency and customer service at the same time if you do it right. So I compliment Danny, I compliment you guys. I thought the council was smart to look for a perspective that wasn't a specialist in code, because at the end of the day, that's the neurosurgeon.
Yep. Which you always need.
You needed somebody else, or a group of people that could look at it from a completely different perspective.
But the neurosurgeon is not the one doing the intake.
Well, never. As
right?
a matter of fact, they'll complicate the intake, because you know what? They don't know what they don't know. They know neurosurgery.
So no, thank you again for injecting
a
perspective that was so invaluable to that process, and today it's worked, right? So kudos to you. One of the things that we do a little different in the podcast is hand it over to a question that Micah has for you. What do you got for Carlos, Micah?
So now's the time, especially in light of the pandemic, people found themselves going back to school, getting degrees, trying to elevate themselves in life. From a banking perspective, the big thing with education is loans. Who's going to pay for it? So what type of tips would you give, say, high school seniors who are trying to look for colleges for the best deals, trying to figure out how they're going to pay, what to look for in a loan, what not to look for in a loan, the whole process, and even with graduate students who want to go back to school, stop that 9 to 5, what would you give them?
So that's a great question. So the first thing you have to do is calculate the ROI of that loan. You know what ROI is? Return on investment, right? I'm very involved in a lot of things in this community. I've been involved for my entire career in civic organizations, because I think if you're successful, you have to give things back to the community. And one of the things that I always speak to youth about is that when you're starting to look at your education, you need to be sure that the investment that you're making monetarily, and it's not just treasure, it's time, will be commensurate with the reward you're going to get when you're finished, right? So the most important thing you need to do in evaluating that loan is, what do I want to do? How much am I willing to spend? What is it going to pay me when I finish, so that I can calculate what the investment should be? It doesn't work in reverse. You don't go out and spend $250,000 in an education that's not going to give you the appropriate return. You have to work it in reverse. You have to say to yourself, okay, if I spend $1 million in my education, am I going to make 10 over my lifetime? Good return on investment. Am I going to spend $250,000 in my education to make $50,000 a year for the next 20 years? Bad investment, right? So, first advice is calibrate your financing with the outcome once you finish and what you're going to be doing, okay? Also calibrate at what level you can start to be productive in that educational process, not just from a monetary perspective, but from experience to parlay with your education. I advise every single young man and woman that I deal with, get your bachelor's. When it comes time for master's, find a job. Get your master's while you're doing a job. Why? Because that experience is almost as valuable, if not more so, than what you're picking up in the books, right? And make sure that at that point you're trying to pay for your master's without having to borrow to complete it through that job. And it goes back to that return, right? So loans are tough for education, because you're going to get talked into a lot of, you're going to be pulled in a lot of directions, and you're going to be promised a lot of, we'll finance. The financing has to be repaid. The financing has to be repaid, and it can't be a drag once you've graduated to the point where you become dependent and living only to pay that debt. And it has to give you the right return on investment. Also think about the fact that some people are cut out for education and some people are not. I used to chair, I'm the past chair of a very large homeless shelter. here in Miami. It's actually the most important homeless shelter in Miami. We have a lot of people who come unemployed. And originally they were all being pushed towards college. They weren't equipped for college. There were trade opportunities that were excellent opportunities, that they could learn a trade that was being paid for even by the user of the service. And when they came out, they were making equal to or greater than a college grad in the degree that they were originally seeking. So it's not just about the debt, it's about the direction and about what you want to do for the rest of your life, and whether it has to be a college education or something else that prepares you for a different type of life. Do not fall into the trap of borrow, I'll pay later, just for the sake of a degree. It's borrow with an intent and a mission and an expected return, right?
And that's spot on. That's one of the things that I always tell the kids and other folks. There are trades out there that make a lot. My AC guy who goes to my house and he takes care of I know a bunch of other people. He makes nets hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. He's on call 7 days a week, but he nets hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I'll share with you. Obviously, as CEO of a bank, I recruit a lot. Right, I have to hire a lot of people. And one of the things that has been pivotal in my career has always been I want to meet everybody I hire. I don't like people hiring. I want to know, because I need to know that they'll fit culturally with the bank, that they'll fit with how we operate, which is sometimes the most important part of a job, is whether you can actually operate well with the other apples, right? You don't want oranges in the barrel. You always want apples in the barrel. So, anyways, and you interview some of these kids, and so I've got 3 degrees. Okay. You got 3 degrees. Okay, what are they? Well, I started with a bachelor's degree in biology, and then they told me I needed to go get a master's, so I got a master's degree in Roman history, and I got another. Your 3 degrees for what you're trying to apply here are absolutely worthless. Oh, and by the way, I have a ton of student debt because I got my first degree, and then they told me I should have a master's, and they suggested I should have a second master's. Well, kid, with the degrees you've got and what you're going to be offered, your starting salary is going to be in the 50 to 60 range. You're not going to see 6 figures for a long time. And by the way, you might as well have taken those 3 degrees, crumpled them up, throw them in a waste paper basket, because they were worthless. They don't apply. They don't align, right? And it's sad because they were convinced to go out and spend a ton of money on an education that didn't fit their trajectory.
Got it. No, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we do here as well, before we get into some closing remarks, the kids turning around and you get to ask me questions. So anything you got for me?
So I got a simple question for you, right? I know you, I know how you are, and I know your vision, but maybe a lot of people listening don't. What is your vision for Miami Lakes? If I gave you a magic wand and I give you 3 wishes, what would those 3 wishes would be for this township, for this community, if you had control of those wishes?
Well, look, the first one's done, right? So that one I have to be very honest, we accomplished, which was reviving Main Street. And I think that is, you see all the stuff that got built around here was built because there was a purpose behind it. We used to travel to Orlando and get feedback from businesses, and they were like, look, there's not sufficient foot traffic nor disposable income in the center core. So we worked with the Grams, created the nicest apartment product outside of Brickell, right, in Dade County. One of the night you walk in, so movie theater just got like an $8 million revamp. One of the top restaurants from Aventura just moved to Main Street, and it's packed every day. Another one of the top Italian restaurants is moving to Main Street as well, and they hired a 5-star chef. So the revival of the center core of our city has happened. Second one, to me, is our park system, right? I really believe great communities have great parks. Not everybody believes that, but I believe that. And one of the reasons why we've been successful, we have 100 parks. We were very fortunate. We had Lester Collins who actually came up with a master plan. We have a park in walking distance to every home. But our largest parks leave a lot to be desired, right? We have Miami Lakes Optimist Park that is in terrible condition. Basketball courts don't. So I really, really hope that our residents, because it looks like it's heading in that direction, in November, they're going to have the opportunity to vote on a bond. Hopefully, that's what it sounds like where the council's heading, and the majority of the councils have given that direction, where we'll be able to redevelop that park to where this town deserves, right? We're a Class A community. We should have Class A amenities. And that's my second wand. If I had a wand, I would look, and the third, wow, that's an interesting look. The third, to be honest with you, that's, if I had a magic wand, to me, the third desire for our community is just to continue to well, I'm going to add a fourth because I really can't. But the third really is to continue to stay a very tight-knit community. One of the very special things that we have as a town, so like me as mayor, I know at least 5 to 7 families on every block of our town. Every block. We go into anywhere, 5 or 7 families. And I think that creates such a special environment. Cities between 30,000 and 60,000 in population are like the sweet spot in terms of like managing it. The larger they get, becomes a little hard to know people, but that really is but the other wish of mine is 59th Avenue. We have an entire sector of our community. You have the top magnet school in the nation. You have Caterpillar. You have Lufthansa, and NSI. You have Miami Lakes AutoMall, Costco. All these businesses flourishing there, yet you can't easily access that area. So if I had a magic wand, those would be my wants and
great
and
wishes. And I tell you, as a resident, Manny, I commend you because, quite honestly, the park system, you said it's what the community needs. No, it's what the community needs as an incremental gain to its value, because the reality is when people are selecting homes and where they're going to live, all of those amenities are elements of valuation. And you know what? If you want a little bit more money for your home, you want return on investment on your home, and you are not supportive of that infrastructure and those amenities being built around it, you're making a huge investment mistake. So not only is it emotionally and rewarding, it is also financially rewarding in the sense that every single element that you add to the amenity equation adds value to the property. So my commendations to you, kudos to you and to the council. Wish you a lot of success.
Yeah, Milton Friedman, who won a Nobel Prize, and one of the top economists ever. I mean, he was against national parks, right? He always said, look, national parks, we shouldn't be spending, even though I might disagree, but he always said philosophically, at national parks, the national government should not own parks, right? You should allow maybe states or local cities. But he always said that local parks have something called the neighborhood effect. Mm-hmm. Exactly what you touched upon. That there's an impact on people's pockets because it increases property values. People want to live. So even Milton Friedman, he might not have agreed with the national, but on that neighborhood effect.
I'm a fan of Milton's, except for the national parks. I tend to agree with you. The national parks are necessary.
You got that right. So Carlos, in closing, what is maybe that one story or maybe just some inspirational words, something that can inspire the kids? You're going to have 90 kids editing this, plus hundreds of other residents are going to be watching this. But that one message where you can share with, because I think you've already shared a lot of inspiring from that small little package that you brought over from Cuba to where you're at today.
So I always tell staff the following: in life you have to have someone who really, really believes in you. Someone who absolutely thinks and knows that you can do what you set out to do. And most people will immediately ask me, who is that person? And I said, well, that person is the reflection in the mirror. If you wake up in the morning and the mirror doesn't believe in you, that person in the mirror isn't telling you you're the best at what you do and you can achieve what you want to achieve, no one else will believe in you. So believing, achieving, and succeeding starts with you. If you're not able, as a human being, to value your value and to know what you're good at and maximize that, I can guarantee you, Manny, that others won't see it either. So my advice to everyone, old, young, middle, it doesn't matter, is make sure that mirror is telling you the God's honest truth. Make sure that mirror believes in you. And make sure that mirror fully understands what your strengths are. Because at the end of the day, You build on strengths. You don't focus on weaknesses. People will tell you, well, you know what? You need to work on your weaknesses. No, you need to know your weaknesses, not build on them. You need to build on your strengths. That's what exponentially gets you there. So that's my advice.
So there you heard it. Believe in yourself. And there you have it. The CEO of Pacific National Bank, also a Miami Laker, Carlos Fernandez Guzman. Tune in next Wednesday on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.